Today we have with us Ginger Z. Ginger is the chief meteorologist at ABC News, who has covered almost every major weather event and historic storm in the last several years. Prior to joining ABC, Ginger was the meteorologist at NBC News. Throughout her life, Ginger has battled with mental health struggles, which she has opened up about in her memoir, Natural Disaster. I cover them, I am one. So can you give us a brief overview of your mental health struggles?
Sure. So, well, first, I guess it's always an interesting introduction that I've gotten more and more used to including. It's not in my bio, but I am the chief meteorologist at ABC News. But 10 days before I started this job, my dream job, I checked myself into a mental health hospital. And I was at the psychiatric ward in Columbia here in New York City. So I like to start with that because it's shocking to most people. And I think that's where we have a problem. Shocking that I went to the hospital. Would it be shocking if I went to the hospital for anything else that I needed help with? No. And even though I think that people are talking more about their mental health and the stigma has been reduced greatly, I think that there is a giant stigma around hospitalization, still in therapy, for any of the treatment. And so that's where mental health, my struggles, if I start from, the beginning, really the first time I probably knew that I should get help, but didn't, would have been late years of high school into early college. I was diagnosed with narcolepsy while I was in college. And then the medication that I was on for narcolepsy sent me into kind of an extreme world. I had kind of lived narcolepsy makes you half awake and half asleep 24 hours. So you're never fully asleep. I always do the gas pedals, and you're never fully awake. And so you kind of live in this limbo. And I lived in that for a long time. And there are a lot of things that happened in my childhood that made me even more of a suppressor of emotion. And there's a lot that I could get into. But basically, once I had that medication, it turned everything on. And I was feeling for the first time, both positive and negative. And that's when I had my first suicide attempt. And after that should have been the time, and my mom in the medical field, she knew that I had a problem, but I wasn't ready to go get help. And so I didn't. And what I ended up doing from there, and I had anorexia in my past, there's some other stuff that I had kind of building up to this point, but I just ran away from it. And that's something that in my mental health journey, I know was the number one problem. And from there, I had another suicide attempt, and then I had dealt with abusive relationships and quite a few things within that time. And really not until I went to the hospital did I finally get the help I needed.
That's great. No, absolutely. What are some strategies you have used on a regular basis to help manage your mental health?
So number one is transparency. I always say that honesty with myself was the thing that I needed to work on the most. I often, when I would, the 2 times I came back from the hospital from my suicide attempts, I would see myself in the mirror the next day and I would think, who was that girl? I don't know that person that just did that. I feel much better now. And I was talking myself into that for sure. But I also was dealing with something I didn't understand. And so I would pretend it never happened. And I was not honest with other people or with myself. And that just, as we know, becomes a spiral, and it gets worse and worse and worse. And I never lived freely. Even today, the biggest thing I do is when I have one of those mornings where I wake up and it's dark, and I still have them because depression doesn't go away. My mental health illness doesn't go away. I just learned how to manage it with all of the tools I've learned from the right therapist in my life. And I go and when I have that, the first thing I do is I say to myself out loud, this is a dark day. It will get better. And I make myself say it. Then I write it down. Then if I still see it, because it often kind of bubbles up again, I go and tell my husband, I tell my mom, and that's where the honesty with other people starts coming in. The moment you start shining a light on that darkness, it starts diminishing every single time. And for me, it's as simple as that. It's not as simple as that for everyone. And I can't tell you that on those days, when I wanted to end my life and tried, thankfully unsuccessfly, if I think about, could I have said that to myself then if I had the tools? I don't know. I don't know if, the impulsiveness of those days would have changed. but it couldn't have hurt having that tool in my toolbox. The second thing I usually do is when I reach that level of hopelessness, which I do a lot less these days because of the therapy that I'm committed to and because of the really hard work I've put in. It's like being at a gym for your body. I have every single week, at least once a week, if not twice, I am with my therapist. That's like being with a personal trainer once or twice a week. I am writing, journaling, talking to others constantly about mental health. I make it a part of my everyday conversations with friends, with family. That is like doing sit-ups for your brain. You are constantly working. And I've really gotten into meditation. And so those are some of the tools that I've done and I think about it like that. I schedule time for it. I make sure that the mental part is better. And I just at the end of it, and this sounds very cliche, and especially for a meteorologist to say, but I always remind myself on those darkest of days, even when that thing keeps bubbling up and I cannot get it down, I cannot get the depression down, I always say to myself, and I make myself write it, is that the clouds don't last forever. They can't and won't. It's not how the atmosphere works. I'm a scientist. I know that the clouds right now that are in place, they have a purpose. There are storms coming from 12 to 2, and then it's going to clear out after. And I know that that's how the ball of energy that is the earth works. And I know that's how the ball of energy that is my brain and my heart and my soul works. And so I think about that.
Wonderful strategies. So you wrote a book.
Yes.
I have right here, Natural Disasters. I cover them, and I am one. So, you had mentioned a little bit about this, but in your book, or your memoir, you mentioned about obviously narcolepsy and your anorexia. Mm-hmm. How have those two disorders kind of affected your mental health?
Yeah, I still have narcolepsy. I take medication for it. I've just found the right way to deal with that medication and the right dosage and such. Anorexia, I also would say I'm recovered from, but always have. I don't think anorexia is something that leaves you ever, unfortunately. And I talked to some of my best friends about this who have had eating disorders as well. And as much as depression still is with me and I've learned to manage it, I actually think that the seeds of anorexia are even deeper. They're from when I was even younger. And what happens with the anorexia for me is I am not anorexic. I have a pretty healthy relationship with food. What I don't have a healthy relationship with fully yet is myself and my self-talk and the control. And that's what anorexia is about. It's about control. So I know, especially after all of this therapy, that I have triggers, and those triggers include change, transition. Right now is a perfect kind of breeding ground for anorexia for me. The immediate response when I think about feeling trapped, like we all do in this world of some kind of uncertainty, is, well, I've got to control something, and I know how to control my food. I'm like habit-wise expert at it, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's something that I feel myself doing. I do. I start to portion things. I start to think. I start to read more labels. I start to cut things out that I really enjoy. And then I have to tell my husband, because that's the thing, again, is saying it out loud, saying, I'm doing this. I know I'm doing this. I had it with wine this last couple of weeks. I would not let myself have a glass of wine. And I tried to tell myself that it was because of the alcohol things that I had read, and then realized it was the calories, and that was part of my control, was saying, I know what I can do right now because I don't know what's going to happen with my contract or with this, or, you have all of this, and then you have to hold. And for me, that was anorexia. So I'd say I still have that, but boy, being able to manage it is probably 95% of being away from it, and it is such a powerful feeling when I can say to myself, Ginger, I know why you're doing this. Stop. And then have that glass or have that, bit of ice cream with the kids. You're going to be okay.
Right. No, absolutely. So you also talk about, and I'm going to quote this, you mentioned that one of your great deterrents to depression is purpose. Yes. Do you have any advice on how to find your purpose?
Mm-hmm. I wish that I would have known I had purpose back then. I think that's the thing, is we talk ourselves out of thinking that we have purpose. I would encourage people to write down a very simple list at the end of the day of things that you accomplished. Some days it might be very little, and that's okay. Some days it might be a lot, And you write it down, but then ask somebody close to you to write down what you've done or what you've meant or all of those things, and start asking other people day by day. Just go around kind of like a survey. And I think you might find some really interesting things that other people see in you that you don't see in yourself. That's one way to realize that you have purpose, is to just actually write it down and start noting it. And then I would say, make yourself have purpose. At the end of that, if you are saying, okay, I may have some things, but I could probably, I've got some, I've got this room of time where I just feel very down and I feel like I don't have purpose. Go make yourself have it. There are so many people out there that need help. Be, like Mr. Rogers said, there are helpers. Be one of those helpers. There are a lot of ways, even right now when we're social distancing, that you can help other people. And you might be as easy as a phone call. It might be as easy to, this doesn't have to be volunteering at some, even though that's great. And there's lots of ways to do that too. I always encourage people to find that spot. I know you're good at something. I know that people are a fan of you for something. What could you do with that thing, that talent or that light in the world that you bring, that you could give to other people? So think about that.
Again, also you mentioned that getting to ABC, where you are now, was one of your dream jobs, quote unquote. And, obviously you have a family, kids, and so forth. Even in your darkest days, did you ever believe you'd be able to be at a point in your life as successful as you are and having a wonderful family?
No. This was the last thing I ever thought I would have. And that's the thing that I had to, and still work really hard at every day, at telling myself it's okay and you deserve it. Because that's the thing that makes me emotional still, is thinking, there are a lot of us that think, like for me, my career came very easily to me, and I could put effort in and I saw the return, and it always seemed to work. I was lucky in a lot of ways, but I worked my butt off too. So there's a lot of things. I always describe it, very scientifically. It's like my career was just on this trajectory upward, and my personal life was so the opposite. My mental health and personal life were roller coastery, but mostly on a downward trend. And if you would have told me, I actually journaled about this at the beginning of when I was here at ABC, even after I was starting to get that therapy after the hospital, through major tears on an airplane as I'm flying to yet another storm, I see a family get on the airplane, and I just broke down, and I thought, it's never going to be me, and it's just not going to happen. I'm not allowed to have it all, and that thought process is very strange. You'll never have it all, right? But you can have whatever today, just like the sun is out one moment and the storms are out another moment. Good things happen, and they can happen simultaneously, and you're allowed to have that. Even when we moved into this house, I had always lived in kind of okay apartments or renovated kind of nasty houses that weren't in the greatest areas or whatever. My whole career, I didn't live in nice places. Even in New York City, I lived in a nice building, but the apartment was like, tiny. Even with the kids, it's why we moved. And so coming out to the suburbs, the amount you can get for the same amount of money is unbelievable. And this is the first house that I've moved into where it's now taken a full 2 years for me to feel like it's home, and that it's not somebody else's, and that I earned this, and that I, deserve it. And that's something that I've worked on very hard, is to allow myself to have good things. Life is supposed to be full of joy. You deserve joy. You deserve sunshine. I was constantly in a search for chaos, and there's a reason for that. And I've been diving really deep into that. It's like I wanted to hurt. I was attracted to hurt and pain, and I was choosing things a lot of times to make that happen, especially in romantic relationships. And now I can see it, and I wish I could go back and help that girl so that she didn't have to endure as much. But what I do know is that it now makes me incredibly grateful. Every time, every stone on this house I look at, and it makes me emotional, because I think, I can't believe that I get to have this, it's not about the house, it's about what's in the house. It's about my boys having toys all over this basement where I work right now. And then I have kids, I have children. And I always tell people, I've got a lot of young women in my life that are friends, and they're maybe in their early 30s, and they're feeling the same way I felt. Crying on the airplane, it's never going to happen. And I always tell them, You don't know that. You don't know if tomorrow, because that's what happened to me. The next day I met Ben, very soon after that plane ride, I met my husband, Ben. And then I just had to work really hard on allowing the love to come in.
So, what, if anything, has your depression taught you about yourself?
My depression has taught me that I am vulnerable, and there's strength in vulnerability. I think that's, most of my life was spent people pleasing and without really thinking about it, wanting everybody to just love me. I did not want anyone to find fault in me. I wanted perfection. And a lot of us are brought up that way. That's societally what we expect. And so a lot of people in certain personality types become extreme people pleasers to get to the point of making everyone love and adore everything about them. And I was good at that. I mean, I without even trying, right? I was homecoming queen. It just was part of who I was. And it still is. I think part of it's based in kindness. And I think I do have that. My mom always says that's my greatest attribute, is that I genuinely care about people, and I care about animals, and I care, she always knew that from being young. But I can tell you that part of it is driven from that I want everyone to think I'm perfect to a certain point. And then when I went to the hospital, and I didn't tell anybody, just my mom and my cousin, those are the only people in my life that knew, I started realizing that every time I did share a part of my mental health journey, it started alleviating it. It started making it a little bit better. And it never hurt me. And so when I went to write this book, I didn't intend to write this book. It just came out because I started being more vulnerable with people and talking. I was talking to the editor that I was writing a children's book. That's why I went to write a children's book. I did not want to write a book about my suicide attempts. But I did because she and I got to know each other, and I started telling her about what I was basing the children's book on. And then I was telling her about another story about how I didn't get married. And I started talking about Katrina. And then she's like, "That's a book, Ginger." And I was like, I don't know. And then when I started writing it all down, it felt good. And by the end of it, I was confident. The night before it went to press, I was like, I got to stop this. This can't happen. Everybody's going to know everything. Like it reminded me of the people pleaser started coming up again. And she was like, don't let it happen. And then my husband, it's like 2 a.m. and he said, if you weren't nervous, if you didn't feel this way, then this book isn't going to make a dent. If it was just another nice book from a nice person with a pastel sweater like this on the front, that's not going to do it. So that's why you have to let this book out. And then I totally swayed again. And by the time I was reading the audiobook, I was like, did I tell them enough? Did I get enough out there? So I think that's the other lesson I learned is when I started getting people writing me, everything from they had no idea to, that they connected with my story so much, all the way to the point of the many emails I've gotten that said, your book saved my life. I actually have emails with that subject line, your book saved my life. I realized that it didn't matter the people that were not happy with my imperfection. It mattered more about the people who were helped by it. And so I know that people don't like me and don't like what I say and I'm okay with it. And that's what this book really is a symbol of, and how much it helped me grow. And I didn't even anticipate that.
Yeah. So in this country, according to the National Institute of Mental Health, 1 in 5 adults live with mental illness. What would you define as mental health?
I think it covers everything. And I think that the 1 in 5 is very low. That's like saying, I think 1 in 5 people struggle with, keeping a healthy nutrition and weight. I think that that's just not true. I think that there is a range now, and this is what makes it so difficult. This is why it's been difficult to describe for all of history, and it's been difficult for hospitals and for government to figure out what to do with it, because there isn't one definition. There isn't, as far as we know, DNA or gene necessarily for all of them. There's obvious ones. There are obvious and different that to me are chemical, and you have bipolar, and you have your schizophrenia, and you have some of what I would suggest when I went to the hospital that I think of as severe. But they're severe only in a way because they are distinct, right? So that you know that there's something wrong. I think what happens in all of the other types, in anxiety, in depression, is that there's so much muddiness and so much grayness that we don't know how bad it is, because we don't have that clear-cut thing that says this is what it is. And a lot of times we're not diagnosed correctly. And that's the other thing that I always try to push the hospital for. The hospital is a whole nother issue, because they have, it's a financial issue with keeping people in beds. But when you have a place to go that can say, okay, here's an expert that's going to be like your primary doctor. And the primary doctor would look and say, oh, you have a hip issue, I'm going to send you to an orthopedist, or I don't know if that's the right, but you know what I'm saying? Like a foot doctor, You get a recommendation to a specific part of your body. I think in mental health, we need the same. I think that everybody needs to go to that centralized spot and then get, disseminated to wherever they need the extra help. And that's why I finally got the help I needed. It was depression. It was my mom's personality disorder, borderline personality disorder. Having that around me and perhaps in me, that was something that needed to be tended to and had never been diagnosed. So knowing that, and then getting the type of doctor who specializes in that, that was it. Right? He knew exactly what to do. It was the best. It was like I didn't even have to try. He was helping me every step of the way, and he still does. And so I think getting the right fit of therapy is also such a critical part of this messaging. But even, I have friends too, during this time, they said, I've never had problems with mental health, but the environment right now of a worldwide pandemic makes me feel this way. And I think that shouldn't be laughed off or not included, or, no matter what, if you feel hopelessness or helplessness, you should have access to the ability to talk to somebody about it, to get the help you need, just like everybody else. There's such different levels of severity. Mine was up there, I would say. I was regularly wanting to take my life. That's up there. But not one is more important than another. And I think that's what I think, and this is what I really want to get across, if anything, if you've heard anything this whole interview, is not only do we need to destigmatize the action of going to the hospital or going to a therapist, but we need to make it accessible for everyone. Because how lucky am I that I had the financial ability and the support from family and friends to be able to do it. But to also make it where it's not just accepted, but it's almost attractive. Drug and alcohol rehabilitation at this point in our society, I would say, is fully accepted. Would you? Right? Yeah. If somebody goes and they come back from one of the many places that there are to go for drug and alcohol rehabilitations, the many groups that there are, you go, good for them. Wow, that's great. And it's like this understanding of the disease of alcoholism took a long time. And I don't think everybody's got it, but I think we've gotten a lot farther. We need to get there. Drug and alcohol rehabilitation, I always say, is almost sexy. And I think that mental health rehabilitation or help needs to be almost sexy. We need to say, oh, good, you needed a week to go to that place that's totally affordable and accessible for everybody. And then after that week, you got the right help, and now you're committed to do it. And that, there's another parallel to health camps. You'll go to these camps where people are learning nutrition and health. Same thing. Take that week, that month, whatever it is that you should be allowed to take, just like you would for other parts of your health, and then work on it. Our mind is driving our whole body, right? I mean, that's what's driving it. Why are we waiting till last to take care of it when we're working on getting, a knee and a hip replacement? It's like we didn't even do the sit-ups for our brain yet. So I think that that's really important.
So it's our last question, but for any, I know you spoke a little bit about this already, but just kind of to encompass everything that we've spoken about, for anyone who's struggling with mental illness, obviously it can also be, it can be anorexia, it can be narcolepsy, since you speak about that in your book as well, depression, anxiety. What advice would you give them to keep moving forward and shed light that there is a light at the end of the tunnel?
So I would wake up every day that you can, and something that's helped me greatly is not just meditating early in the day to kind of set my intention and get my mind right, I would say. So get into meditation. It's not as wildly difficult as people try to make it out to be, and it's not about being thoughtless. It's about having the ability to, it's just like, as my colleague Dan Harris calls it, the treadmill for the brain. So meditation, I would start gratitude. That's such it's an overused word right now, but it is so necessary. So I always write on my shower wall what I'm grateful for and what my intention or goal would be for the day. And I think setting those two things out is a great way to get started. And talk, write, be honest with yourself. Those are the biggest things. If you can do all of those things, then you saying, today's a dark day. When you said it out loud, if you can say it to somebody else that's close to you in your life, you know what? I'm having a lot of dark days lately. Do you know what that just did? It just opened a whole door. If you haven't done that yet, do it. Now, if you're to the point that I was, where I had definitely people knew, I mean, my mom knew, and, and I wasn't ready to get help. I think that sometimes it really does just take time. So I guess it's patience in, yourself and knowing it's got to get better. It can't be like this forever. Just like the clouds, just like the storms in our atmosphere. It just can't stay one way. And remembering that we are ever changing, and just as bright and sunny as it can get stormy again. Having that realistic view is really helpful.
That's such great advice. Well, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
Doing this with us. I will say one thing on a personal level, is that I actually suffer from anxiety and depression myself. And so actually reading your book, I feel like actually a natural disaster like you, because I have difficulties with transitions. I'm on my medication, like I go through my strategies, CBT and so forth, but I resonate so much with your struggles.
Yeah.
Really nice to see that as I was reading your book.
And I think something that I'm writing another book right now, and something that I, wished I had added is like the grace for yourself, because I had I run a lot, and I try, my workouts, I've been working out since I was 12. I've been obsessed with working out at certain points. What I've learned from working out, and this is that body and mind connection and parallel, is you have to remember, some days, like yesterday, I went for a 5-mile run. It was so hard. It was just one of those days where I'm like, what is wrong? Like I couldn't breathe. My muscles felt really tired. My feet were cramping. I was like, what is happening? It was just a bad day for my body. Last week, I ran like a gazelle. I ran the same amount on the same path, and I ran, like, sprinted up the hills, and I was just having a good running day. My mind does the same thing. There are days that it's just gonna be, and then I just have to say, like yesterday with my body, I was like, okay, stretch a little more, take care of it a little more, and maybe don't run tomorrow. Like it's as, I think in a lot of ways we give ourselves too much pressure. We're making ourselves think that our mental health needs to be perfect every day. No, it doesn't. It's like people say it's okay not to be okay. That's what it is. It's like, embrace that. Have that day. Have a day suck. Some days suck. And then what can you do about that suck? Or what can you do with it? And once I laugh at that, and once I giggle at how sucky it is, and I don't compare to other people, and I try, because you can't. Of course other people have it worse than you, but the moment you start guilting yourself into thinking that your mental health isn't as bad as the next person's mental health, you're going to spiral even faster. So stick with yourself, stay in your lane, and realize, like, it's a bad day. It's a bad day. And maybe later today it's going to be better. And the environment might change around you, and you might be having a great day, and then something happens and it's not a great day, and then something happens and it is a good day again. Like, we're all very variable. We're a bunch of, like, crazy things happening. We all are disastrous that way. And that's something else that I found from writing the book. The number of people who wrote back and said exactly what you did is, I'm a disaster too. I'm like, I know, because we all are. And that's the club of being in a disaster is huge.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This was lovely.